training tonight, and right when training ends is when the snow's supposed to start, so could get sporty.
Yeah, well, hopefully you don't have to use any of that training.
Amen to that. Have a good one. K0EFB.
All right, Ryan, have a good one. Catch you later. KC0 Killgate.
Good evening, this is N7GES, and welcome to the NCARC TechNet. We meet each Monday evening here at 6 p.m. for discussing amateur radio technical issues. We appreciate comments and suggestions and questions. You can email us at elmers@ncarc.net. You can listen on this either of these machines, the 275, the 750, the Echolink at W0UPS-R, and on our YouTube channel. We'll start with check-ins. It's not necessary to check in to still make comments. We welcome anybody to check in or to ask questions or whatever, but check-ins are nice to just know who's out there and who might be listening. Let's go ahead and see who'd like to check in tonight.
Oh, I guess I'll start. Zero Kilo Delta uniform. Good evening, Kevin. This is Joe.
Well, good evening, Joe.
Kevin, KE0OXV, Scott, in Fort Collins, joining the net.
Okay. Good evening, Joe. KD0TYU and Scott, KE0OXV. Who else is here tonight?
KF4DUS, Horsetooth Mike.
And KL2QO, Kilo Lima 2, Quebec, Oscar, Dusty, and Hygiene.
Okay. Welcome, Mike, KF4DUS, and Dusty, KL2QO. I did see your email to the Elmers list, and if we don't get other answers shortly, I'll try to do what I can as well. So, anyway, welcome. Newcomers are always welcome. Who else is in here that would like to check in tonight? N7GES.
N0WIQ.
WIQ. Thank you very much, Carrie. Well, check-ins are coming kind of slow tonight, but trickling in. Anybody else want to check in at this time?
This is Alpha Echo Zero, Charlie Foxtrot, Ben, Fort Collins.
K1 DEG will be monitoring on this side. I also add N0KIN on the list too.
November 1, Romeo Delta Charlie, Ryan and Loveland.
N60AT, Josh, Fort Collins. Okay. AE0CF, K1DEG, N0KIN, N1RDC, and let me see if I got this last one, N6, Delta Alpha Tango, is that right, Josh?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, very good. Welcome all, and thank you very much. Anybody else?
Kilo Echo Zero, Charlie Papa Romeo, Mark in Loveland.
Okay. Evening, Mark, KE0CPR. Thank you very much. Okay, one last call for check-ins at this point.
Kilo Alpha 6, Echo Tango Echo, KA6ETE, Jim, Loveland.
Hey, welcome, Jim, KA6ETE. Thank you for checking in. Appreciate that. Okay, let's get started with our topic, and anyone wishing to check in later can still always do that. It was suggested that we talk a bit about what a mobile radio can do for you that an HT won't. There's some very obvious answers, certainly, that come up right away, but there are probably several other things as well. Lots of similarities between the two. One of the biggest differences probably being power, the amount of power that an HT will transmit versus a mobile rig. A lot of them, a few HTs actually have crossband repeat capability, but that's pretty few and far between, and with less power, that's certainly going to be somewhat less effective, but it's there occasionally. So that's something that you're certainly going to gain more effectiveness with a mobile rig. Those are a couple of the very most obvious things that come to mind at the beginning. So let's see, what would people like to add to that list, and then what questions might we have? Oh, it's a quiet night tonight. Obviously, one of the reasons a person would want a mobile rig is for additional power. You could do something like an HT and an amplifier, but by the time you've done that, you may find that you've spent about as much for a mobile rig. Maybe not, maybe so. But certainly then with the mobile rig comes one unit that accepts power, has a microphone and an antenna connector, and no two separate units that have to be interconnected and checked and adjusted and that sort of thing. You do have the additional power. You will have more likely a radio that will do dual receive and crossband repeat. That's a lot more common in mobiles and certainly more effective when you have more power to deal with. You're also going to be running them on 12-volt supply, which you're probably going to have a bigger 12-volt supply and therefore not be quite as concerned about running it down. Of course, an HT can be run that way, but they're not automatically set up that way. They're set up with an internal battery, which of course is going to give you a lot less operation time unless you go to the trouble of setting up an external power supply for those radios. Other comments or additions to this? As this was club provided topic, I was certainly hoping that the club would come forward a bit more, and maybe we will eventually. Certainly you can get HTs that are very, very function-filled, but that's probably not the quite so much the norm. For example, an HT that does APRS location, as I said, crossband repeat, dual receive. Dual receive, there's two types of dual receive. That's the dual watch, which means you're not going to hear two conversations at once. You'll hear one, and then when it stops, you'll hear the other channel. But an actual dual receive radio, you really have to get into pretty high-end HDs before you get that. And so a lot of those features you're going to get more readily in a mobile rig. All right, questions or comments?
BYU.
We had two DUS.
I can for DUS. Two radios that I can think of at the top of my head. I own one of them. The Yaesu FTM-10. It's geared for putting in a motorcycle, and but it's a dual band radio, 50 and 40 watts, VHF, UHF, but it's hobbled because it's only a single band display, and therefore single band receive at any given time. And the other one I know of is the FTM 100, the smaller mobile version of the FTM 400. And same thing, dual band but single display. That radio does have APRS on it, like the 400, but it's only a single display. So take that in mind if you don't care about having two different bands on your screen at the same time and listening, that's fine. But if you do care, it's a couple of different radios you want to probably shy away from. Excuse my scratchy voice. KF4DUS.
Okay. Mike, now the FTM-10, is that an HT or you said it's for motorcycle use, but it's actually a mobile, right?
Yeah, it's a mobile. I don't think they make it anymore. I bought it. The body goes under the seat of my scooter, and then the control head can either mount on the handlebar or on a section of the dashboard. And it's a 50 watts VHF, 40 watts UHF, and I have it in the house right now. But excuse me, but it works real well. But it's only a single display. So if I want to talk on VHF, I'm stuck on VHF. Now I'll have another radio, an HT, listening to another band, and then I'll know if someone was calling on the other band. But yeah, it's an older radio. Doesn't have a fan on it. Just has a really good heat sink. Never did have a problem with it overheating under the seat in the scooter.
Okay, very good. We certainly know that there are plenty of mobiles out there that are less feature-rich, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad radios, but they just don't have as much availability to some of the extra features. However, as Mike mentioned, it still has a higher power rating than any HT you're going to be dealing with, and so you do still have that advantage. Okay, Joe, TYU.
Well, I agree with this is KD0TYU. I guess for ID, better do that. I definitely agree with what Mike says on this. I have always been one that liked the dual display and also the dual receive. And I'm kind of a mobile. I've got a bunch of handhelds, but very seldom use them. And I guess it's the flexibility of the mobile compared to the handheld that I like primarily. I'm gonna let this drop, and then I'll come back. I know that when in the Aries group, I was asked to maybe go to Sterling. This has been 3-4 years ago, and when you get into that type of situation, you need a little bit more power. And of course, some of the old Yezus and that had I think they were 45 or 50 and 35. And the Kenwood was sitting with 50 on both sides. So you couldn't get that with a handheld. I do believe, and maybe Kevin, you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, there are some handhelds that do have dual receive on it, but I'm not aware of any. I don't have any for sure. But I think that the option of it, the crossband repeater, you've just got a lot more flexibility with a mobile than you do with a handheld. Back to you, sir.
WIQ.
Okay, Kerry, just a moment. Yes, Joe, there are a few HTs that actually do give you full dual receive. There's a few TYT models. There may be a few others. And, of course, there's the Kenwood high-end HT that does that as well. But you have a lot less choices when you're really looking for absolute dual receive, as opposed to dual monitor or dual watch, as it's often called. WIQ?
It turns out, and even you, Kevin, the UV5R is a dual receive. And you have to select the band you talk on. So you have to change that if you hear something interesting on the other band. But anyway, UV5R, and I also have a whoosh on that is that way also. They are the lesser expensive handhelds, and yet they have those features. They are handhelds, like the UV5R is only rated at 4 watts output. If you get one that works, with an antenna that works. And the whoosh on, it worked fine, just the first one I got had a manufacturing error in it, so it became intermittent. So I sent it back and got a new one. So, I mean, hey, it's one of those things that And when I used an FT530 in years past, it had a dual display too. And so they aren't as rare as you might think they are, Kevin, but also the mobile, the primary thing it has is it has more power. You can put a better antenna on the car than you can on a handheld. Things like that. Of course, some handhelds, if you put a good antenna on them, they don't work so good. So, I mean, those are my comments, and I'll stick by them. Back to you, Kevin.
Okay. We'll make one distinction. The UV5R is not technically dual receive. It will do dual monitor or dual watch, but it will not actually receive two signals at one time. You will not be able to hear two channels simultaneously. It will monitor, it will listen on both channels, it will receive on one and then check the other when that first signal goes away. And they call that dual watch in a lot of cases, or dual monitor, but it is not truly dual receive. I do believe that Pujing makes one that is dual receive, and I believe TYT at least does as well, and there may be a few others. As I said, the high-end Kenwood does that in the HT versions, but when you get into mobile, there are lots and lots and lots of them that do that. Okay, other comments? Let's stop for questions. Any questions on all of this? This is N7GES with the TechNet. Hey, other comments? QO? QO, go ahead.
You know, the talk about the dual band and dual receive radios reminded me of my very first radio, which was the ICOM ICW32A, which was and still is, if I can get it powered on, dual receive. And it had a crossband repeat function, and basically it was a really good little radio, except for the speaker. It was a little bit on the small side, so the frequency response was quite limited, but it let me do everything I ever needed to do for a handheld. Of course, it's been discontinued for years, but I sure liked that little radio. But as far as going to mobile, I don't know. I actually carry a portable and a mobile around. Yeah, I don't carry a mobile around, but carry a portable with me for the most part, even in the truck. But I like the ability to just have a radio be fixed in the vehicle in one place and not have to fuss around with it. It's I also don't run the risk of looking like I'm fiddling with a phone, especially in states that have laws about that.
Good point. No reason to get in trouble because you're playing with a piece of equipment if you can help that. So, or holding a handheld. Good point. Very good. Yeah, I had not heard of the old ICOM model, but I'm sure that people have tried it from time to time, and I'm sure you did get a lot out of that. Other comments?
CF?
CF?
I was wondering about handhelds that end up having like APRS TNCs that are accessible from an outside computer, or the ones that have APRS built in you must, other than using the audio input-output, you must use the internal computer device to transmit data. I mean, specifically would be for, let's say, transmitting text data or mail sorts. This is A0CF.
Okay. I know that Kenwood's a very high-end radio, and I can't remember the number of it right now. I want to say DM10, but I don't think that's right. Anyway, I know that it does have built-in GPS. This is an HT, and it does allow you to connect to it with a computer to some degree anyway. Anybody have info on any of the other HTs that have GPS built in? And can you use that GPS with a computer, or are you restricted to using it on the HT only?
TYU?
TYU?
The TYT 390 and now the TYT 380 has GPS. However, you cannot use it legally on the DMR side, but you can on the analog side. And I've actually got one of those.
Right, and several of the other DMR radios do have a GPS unit, but they won't actually do APRS either. And I don't know that they allow any access to the GPS from the outside world either, but it would be neither here nor there, I guess, if it wasn't supporting APRS, at least as far as I think what you were wanting to know there, Ben. Anybody else, any other HTs that do APRS besides the Kenwood model?
N0 WIQ, my ID51 has a GPS in it.
Okay, you broke up. What was the model? ID what?
5.1. I think it got up to 5 plus or something of that nature. So, anyway, the ID51 is the ICOM's digital handheld. It also does stand FM, all that kind of stuff, but it's probably made for DR, and where the GPS is set up to be used with. So I'll just leave it at that. Back to you. Back to Ned.
I don't know why you're breaking up today. It may not be your fault. I'm not sure, but we caught most of that transmission. However, does that GPS do APRS? Does that radio do APRS, or is the GPS only for the D-Star operations?
As far as I know, it is only for the D-Star stuff. So I for breaking up, well, I got this thing set down to 5 watts with the antenna in my attic, so the weather might be creating the issue. Otherwise, I know it works fairly decent.
Very good, thank you. Other comments, questions?
CF again. Just wanted to, wondering about the, actually not just specifically GPS, but actually transmit and receive data. I mean, APRS is not only for tracking.
Okay, so you're wondering about getting the data that is received from APRS channels. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be correct. That would be something that I was wondering if HTs sort of, as a optimization, they omit that functionality and perhaps a mobile unit has that accessible as an option.
Well, there's kind of a couple of ways to answer that. First of all, if you, as you know, the APRS data is an audio signal, two-tone shifting FSK signal. So if you have a computer that can decode that, you could receive that on any radio you wanted, as long as the receiver wasn't, or the audio system in the radio wasn't skewed in such a way that it wouldn't receive it, wouldn't decode it, wouldn't reproduce it properly. But of course, that would mean you do have to have some hardware that can listen to those tones and pick them up, or a computer software program and a sound card. As far as actually outputting the text from APRS, I don't know that any radio will do that unless it's actually built to handle APRS. And in a mobile, the same situation. You know, if you buy a radio that does not have APRS capabilities, you could connect it to a sound card and get the APRS data. But you won't get direct text out of it to serial or USB port or anything like that, unless the radio actually has APRS built into it. Did that tackle your question?
Yeah, that's a little bit closer. Yeah, I was just wondering because I'd imagine that handhelds would omit ports just due to size, and if a mobile had a TNC built in, it should have plenty of space that you can put a port there, and then you can connect your computer and don't have to worry about the computer having to decode it, the audio frequency shift keying or whatnot. Which actually, I was wondering about how much CPU bandwidth that would use, but never mind. That's something different. This is AE0CF.
I think generally, if the radio's got APRS in it, it's going to have a port where you can do something with it. Even the HT, the Kenwood HT, does have that. And you know, so far nobody else has mentioned if any other HT has got GPS or APRS in it. Surely somebody does, but I don't know for sure. But I would imagine that if it's already got APRS, it's probably got a port, because that's not been a particularly major issue. All of the HTs now do have a data port on them because they will connect to a computer for dumping memories in and out. So that same port certainly could be used for other things as well. So it's not really a problem of space, I don't think, to include that port. It's just a matter of including the internal hardware to do that functionality. Thank you. Good points. Appreciate that. Other questions or comments about comparing mobiles to HTs? I think we've hit most of the basics, but there might be some other basic question that somebody might have. If you've not dealt with with one or the other of them before, please feel free to ask. We're not going to laugh at you.
TYU with a question.
You go.
Kevin or somebody out there that really knows this stuff. APRS, of course, you know, we use it for Aries, we use it for Skyward, we use it for the stuff like that. But it's also a constant packet, and I'm wondering if the reason they don't put a lot of this stuff in to handhelds is because of the power draw on it. I mean, if you have a radio that you key in and you're actually spending power then, but that APRS sends a signal out every now and again. Is that the reason they don't put them in all of them, or is this just something that I don't know. That's just a question.
WIQ.
Yeah, WIQ, hold on a minute. You're right about the power requirements. Certainly a GPS unit's going to eat up power. Transmitting data, well, I don't know if that's going to eat up that much power, except that every time it transmits, and it may transmit more often. I doubt that's the reason. I don't know that for a fact, but I will bet that it just is something that is going to add to the cost, and so they don't include it unless you're paying some high dollar amounts. But that's kind of only a guess on my part. UIQ?
Oh, Kevin, you're partially right. So is Joe. But when you think about it, most of that stuff is done dual tone switching on FM channel. And FM channel uses full power in the first place. So that's going to be about the same battery draw, whether it's data or voice. So anyway, that's my comment on that. And also, I wanted to mention a good share of mobile radios are just as good as any bench radio you can buy. Just that the bench radio is more impressive to show your hearts. And also there are situations where the mobile radio aren't as good as that bench radio. But anyway, mobile radios tend to be somewhat less expensive than a benchtop radio because they don't have an internal power supply. You have to have a regular power supply, a 12-volt power supply, to plug into the mobile radio to use it on your bench. So, I mean, it's a good radio, and you don't need to diminish it by the power supply you put on it. And also, some of the new power supplies are what they call switching regulators. And the switch signal of the regulator can get into the receive circuit of some HF radios. So you want to be able to move that some distance away from the radio to keep it out of the radio. But yeah, little tricks like that that an experienced person like me knows about, and that's basically it.
Thank you, Kerry. This is N7GES with the TechNet. Any other questions before we go on? Questions? Other comments about this subject before we continue? Well, I hope we covered that adequately. I think there's some stuff that's pretty well cut and dried, but it's always good to have the reminders. All right. Any other comments, topics anybody would like to bring up since we've got a bit of extra time here? Open topic at this point. Any questions for the net at this point? Any topic? Okay. I have a question then for the net. Next week's topic. Either the new FT8 modes. What are they? How do they work? That's an HF data mode, and there's been a lot of development in those here lately. Any interest in discussing that next week?
RDC, I vote 1 for the FT8.
anybody else? Alrighty. My other topic was, suggestion had been, Aurora, and, hold on just a minute. Let me look this up because I suddenly can't remember, and I didn't have it written down in front of me just yet, so just a minute. N7GES. N7GES. I got distracted here because I did not get this looked up before I started here. So stand by for just a moment, please.
N0WIQ about digital radio for a short time, and is the software designed radio. If it's designed for all the features, it could do any kind of digital mode that you would want it to do. But that's a software defined radio, so you think about that.
Okay, let me see. The other topic that was suggested was meteor scatter, and the aurora, and how to use meteor scatter. What is it? And also what is the aurora and its effects on HF? Figured that there were two things there that we could probably combine into an interesting net. So, any other votes for that one? I guess it's FT8 new modes next week. I hope we gain a bit more enthusiasm and perhaps some good interest. And I will also need some folks next week that are familiar with those modes and the recent developments in that area. So I will email that out today. And so hopefully we'll have an interesting topic for you next week. I thank you all for your participation. Again, if you have comments about the net, questions about the net, or questions for the net, in other words, questions you might like us to discuss, please email those to us. Elmers, Echo, Lima, Mike, Echo, Romeo, Sierra, Elmers at ncarc.net. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. This is N7GES, clearing the frequency for normal use.
Kevin, I had a quick announcement.
Okay, go ahead.
BYU, folks, yesterday afternoon, James put in the new repeater. If you didn't know that, right now we're dealing with that new Motorola that's up there right now, so that's what's going on. Just thought I'd mention that.
This presentation was brought to you by the Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club. For more information, visit our website, ncarc.net. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.